Holy shit, everybody. We are I can't say thank you enough. This has been some of the most exciting talks that we've had. We have really upped the ante, and I'm hearing there is a possibility we might actually go over 50K in donations. We're so close. We're actually getting on LinkedIn, starting to challenge some vendors out there just to make sure that because dude, if we get through that 50K, it's a rush. There's no benefit, there's no good or bad. It's just so cool. I mean, we all saw $7 helps us a kid in need, right? So 50,000 divided by 7. I can't do the math, but it's staggering. But we're all also here to learn a little bit. And with that, we have an amazing talk today that I am actually very excited about because it's in that vertical that is near and dear to my heart, which is leadership. And there's no one better to have on to talk about, right, what it looks like attracting the right people. What does it look like to really aid the most important thing in your stack at an MSP, which, well, it's your people stack. How do we patch our people and how do we create an environment where they're like, I want to work for you or I can work for you? There's not an intimidation with this giant education and knowledge gap. Obviously, I'm biased here. I was a part of a team that created a whole tool around this problem because it is a problem. Us finding tier threes and unicorns just doesn't scale. So, with that, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Amanda Lachapelle. So, thank you to have you on. And I can't wait to hear what you have for all of us. I'm going to get off stage, though, and let you go ahead and do this.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. All right. Let me get situated here. Okay. I have everything I need. So for those of you who do work at an MSP or run an MSP, you know how stressful it can be. I think this industry kind of has a really bad rep for chewing through people and just kind of creating this stressful environment because the reality is it's very fast paced. There's things that are constantly changing. Some days, maybe a little bit slower, and some days are like breakneck speed. Um, it's very intense. That needs to be acknowledged. Some people want to be an internal because it's not so much. But the people who work well at an MSP are resourceful. And I think we need to talk about this a little bit more and what it looks like so that we can capture the right people and make sure that we're keeping the ones who know how to work within an MSP inside of this space. So my talk today will go through some suggestions of what we've done at B4 to be able to kind of put out all of who we are because we're a little bit kooky. I've got my staff here today. I'm purposely keeping the chat muted so that I don't see what antics they get up to because I know they're going to mess with me. But we like to talk about what it is that we've done. And it doesn't mean that that's the right thing for you. I don't really want to tell you and give you a blueprint of exactly what you should do. What I want you to think of is what you should consider. What is important for you to put out there so that you're highlighting who you are, whatever that looks like. All right, so Kyle did a great job of talking about me. I don't really want to talk about me, but I think it's important so that maybe you could trust a little bit more of what I'm saying. I have been the CEO at B4 Networks since 2017. This is a company that I co-own with my husband, Brian Lachapelle. I've worked for some major companies. I've worked for Dell Canada, Canadian Tire in their head office. This is the second business that I've grown. And my focus in operations is really about streamlining things. As a person, I'm kind of passionate about, and not kind of very passionate about, neurodivergence, creating belonging in tech in my own company and out in the world. And then documentation, company culture, systems, automation, that kind of stuff. And I myself, in addition to holding the role that I have, I am also the creator of the Women in STEM bursary. We give out a bursary every single year through a not-for-profit B4 Power, and we help bring women into the space. I'm also the facilitator and creator of That's So Tech, which is a podcast that we started for our admin team specifically. We were trying to think of how we could help train them to deal with all the jargon and kind of bananas that comes along with working in an MSP. And so we created that, and hopefully it helps other people as well. I am also, if you can see there's one goose there. There's another one just out of camera there. I'm a board member for MSP Geek, Goots for Life. and a council member for the North American Executive Council for GTIA. So all of these things really mean it's not really anything that says I'm special, but it does say that I am traveling in a lot of circles and talking to a lot of different MSPs about what it is that works and doesn't work. And I am a personal fan of community. I think it's a huge driving force for innovation, and this is how we can all learn together. This is why I'm here today. I mean, it's great to do something that helps give back for the Rural Tech Fund. I think that's very in line with who we are as a company. But I also think it's important that as a community we come together and help educate each other and share the notes. I mean, nobody has an exact blueprint. I mean, some people will tell you they do, but nobody has an exact blueprint of exactly what you need to do, paint by numbers to run an MSP. So this is how you do it. You hear different people, hear their viewpoints, and kind of take what you need, and then move on and move forward with what makes sense for you. Okay, enough about me. All right. So I think I would be remiss if I didn't start this talk out with asking you to really consider if you have the right building blocks in place right now. We can make a grand plan for how you're going to bring new people in or how you're going to attract people, but all of that is a wasted effort if we don't have a plan for how to keep them. Now, that answer is different for everyone, but for us, I want to make sure that I'm creating a culture that keeps the people that are going to not only mesh well with my team, but understand how we do things. I mean, an MSP provide service, but the how, the little intricacies of how you speak to a customer, how you speak to your team members, do you work in a silo? Do you work well with others? Do you collaborate? There is no one right answer, but there is a right answer for your company. There is a way that you work. So I want to make sure that the people that I bring in are going to fit culturally within our company. Now, that does not mean that they all have to be the same. So I'm going to share a story, as I'm want to do. I have an example of this, I would say ineffectively applied. So once upon a time, before Networks had a service manager, no longer a service manager here, who believed in asking in a question in an interview about what video games a person would play. And that would kind of highlight if they had something in common, if they watched the same TV shows, or if they played the same video games, then automatically that would bump them to the front of the line. This was before I was involved in this part. And, that's not a bad question. It's not a bad thing to ask per se, but excluding someone based on that might be a little bit too narrow. When I say culture, what I mean is, why don't you ask somebody if they play video games or if they have a home lab, not what they have in it, and make sure that you agree. You just want to understand things about people that help indicate whether or not whatever flavor they've chosen that they are investigating, involved in, looking at, or passionate about similar things to the people currently in the building. And if it is something different, then maybe there isn't too much of a mismatch when that comes in that. Now, the culture is twofold. It is the people and how they show up, and it is also the leadership. So it is important to make sure that you as leadership have ways that you are spreading culture throughout your organization. And I have tips coming on like later on in this talk about that specifically, though I know there are amazing talks that have been given today, I think even right now, about culture. So yeah, the home lab comment is exactly right, Josh. That's a perfect example. But if you needed them to have the same setup as you do in the office, that's probably not going to happen. You can also hear about what the driver is, just on that point. The driver is about their home lab. If they have 18 different things that is all dedicated to one kind of technology, then you know that the thrill of the chase is important to them, that shiny things, are important to them. All right. So back sort of on track. Building blocks are also things like, the shinies. Do you have a clearly identified pay scale? Do people understand what it means to want to move up? Do they know where they could go? Do they have an ability to learn? I mean, Kyle said it at the beginning. And I think it's really kind of highlighted through all of the talks that you'll be hearing from here, because this is something that we're missing a little bit The current college and university programs are great. They're places for exploration and learning, but technology moves at such a fast pace that we couldn't hope to expect everybody leaving post-secondary education to have everything, in their toolbox. You want to know that somebody is hungry and thirsty to learn. And if your office, if your place is not a place that they can learn, I mean, you can't really blame them if they don't keep their skills updated. So you need to have that building block in place. Another huge one, are you listening? Do you do anything with the feedback? Do you tell people what it is you're working on? I mean, leadership isn't just about, kicking back and putting your feet up. You need to take the insights given to you by your staff and really action them. These building blocks are key because there's a reality that I don't know if enough people are talking about. The talent shortage, it's not just an MSP problem. The talent shortage is across the board, an issue in every industry at the moment. And I think there's many reasons for that. But in the MSP space specifically, there's a journey, a life cycle, if you will. If you, as a business, get good at understanding what the life cycle is and where someone starts on their journey to where they end up, then you can actually adapt your approach to learning and to how you support your staff to be able to capture as much of that life cycle as possible. And when I say capture, I mean have longevity. That comment I made at the beginning about MSPs chewing through staff. I know some MSPs, they expect people to stay 2 to 3 years. At B4, we've got technicians who've been with us for 8, 9 years, and they stay because we're cognizant of the fact that what they wanted to do when they started is not going to be what they want to do now. How they want to work is going to change as they mature in their career. And the more that you can account for that, the less turnover you're going to have. And that's technician specific, but that also can be something that you can consider for almost any role within an MSP. All right, so let's get to the meat here. I know that there are some that are going to see this slide and think, oof, because everybody hates sales and marketing. Sorry, sales and marketing, but it's very true. It's got a negative connotation. But when you're thinking about bringing in new talent, you really have to think of it that way, in my opinion. Everything comes back to sales and marketing because it's a very systematized process. It allows for a blueprint, a plan in terms of if this is the desired end result, we can reverse engineer from there and know how, wide our scope has to be, how many numbers of whatever that you have to do. So when you're putting yourself out there for new employees, it's the same as putting yourself out there for new clients. You need a plan. You need to be able to do that reverse engineering to figure out, if this is the result you like, and this is, hone in on what it is you want in terms of the employee or how long things should take, then you kind of get a chance to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. It's the same in sales and marketing as well. When you think of, retention, you have to retain the employees that you have. You have to have the proper structures to be able to do that. You have to use social media to be able to communicate. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And then you have to think of word of mouth. So all of these are things that we're going to kind of dial in a little bit more in this presentation, but it really is a form of sales and marketing to be able to attract the right person. Sometimes it happens by magic. Sometimes, through complete osmosis, someone can turn around and come in the right way. But really, some of the best people that we've had come in were through planned efforts. They were through things that we put out there, and we're very intentional, and that's basically what sales and marketing is. They're very intentional in their prospects. So let's talk about kind of how we do that, because we want to make sure, using sales and marketing speak, that you get your pipelines in order, right? All right. So in sales and marketing, you have your ideal client profile. I want you to make your ideal employee profile. So I want to be clear. I am not, again, talking about homogeneity. You do not need to go out there and find a copy paste of perfect technician. What I am saying, though, is you should have threads that you can tie together that help create, the shape of what it is you're looking for. If you want diversity, for example, inside your organization, then you need to be looking and asking questions that explore a person's idea of, what diversity is, or how they work and operate within it. And I'm not talking in the sales and marketing speak of like what kind of car they drive, or how, what shoes they have, or any like those type of things. I want you to look at your core values that you have in your organization and think to yourself, what would someone who's interested in for example, ours is teamwork, right? If someone is interested in teamwork, they're probably going to play a sport, right? It doesn't mean everybody on my team plays a sport, but I will know that if someone tells me and they come in and say, I've been playing soccer since I was 11 on this team, this team, this team, then I know that they understand about sharing, that they understand about, how to have respect for their teammates, and that whole load balancing. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to not take someone if they weren't sporty, because I mean, this is tech, it's not always equatable, but it does mean that it can be an indicator. So I want you to think about those things that would be ideal in your core values, that you could ask in questions and interviews that would help highlight that. And then I want you to look to your existing staff. If you look at how your current team is made up, you could engage with things like the ideal team player, or I mean, any Patrick Lencioni's books are great. But there's one in specific that kind of talks about the type of, I think it's the Working Geniuses. They talk about the types of, you can look at the balance of the types of workers that you have and either look for where you have gaps, or you could look for what it is in your current staffing that makes someone great, or where they contribute a lot. And in those cases, it helps you create this. If we sketched out, the perfect employee, perfect, then this is what it would look like, or this is what we might need right now. So that when you're tailoring your language for your job postings, or for what you put out there to your staff about what you're looking for, these are things that you can include. Now, that might shift from role to role, again, depending on the team as well. But it is important to have that employee profile, to have that idea of what it is you're looking for. I want you to think about who is currently successful in your organization and contributing in a meaningful way. If you don't have a system as well, which we'll get into in a little bit, by which to recognize not just what you as an owner or as a leader identify as being contributing in a meaningful way, but their peers as well, that's also something you should take into consideration. Stuff like, you might notice the staff that work really well, they have specific language that they use. They might have causes that they care about. They might have specific hobbies. Like, always bring it back to those types of things. Again, not for homogeneity purposes, just to help create that profile. All right. I know this slide probably, you know, it probably makes you think like, okay, we care about what kind of house they live in. No, no. What I mean by where they live is really about, you have what you deem as a fit. What is their fit? What is the things that matter to them, where they're going to feel supported? If somebody were to come in and say, straight out of high school, I really want a lot of support. I want a lot of feedback. I want to have clear guidelines every time I take anything on. I'm going to look at that and go, they live in a space where they need foundation and framework built, and then they can do what they need to do. But an MSP really just has the foundation. You know where the borders are, but you don't always know exactly what everything's going to look like and be shaped. You need to be able to, like the guy in the Lego movie, kind of build on the fly sometimes. So it's something where if somebody had that and I was looking for a project technician, I would go, okay, that makes sense. But if you're looking for someone who's on help desk, that might be a little bit more difficult, because you really don't know what you're going to get from call to call. So you need to be able to consider that aspect of, where do they live, where does their soul feel happiest, where do they do their best work, and have questions that kind of tailor to that. A lot of what I'm going to tell you has to do with how you frame your interview process and how you approach making sure you get the right fit. We'll get a little bit later on the attracting part, but when you bring people in, you need to make sure that you have ways to vet it, because everybody comes to an interview with their best foot forward. You need to be able to read between the lines and see stuff like this. Yeah. All right. So I kind of talked about, when I talked about the culture piece, I talked about the communication. So this is many layers. Communication is important at virtually every step, every stage. So let's start with the need to communicate internally and keep reinforcing what it is that's appreciated. So at B4 Networks, we have a morning huddle. On a short day, 7 minutes, on a long day, 15 minutes. You might think that this is a lot of time. I know that I've gotten some flack from other people, like, that's a lot of your people's time. You bring everybody together. But what I've found, and what we found as owners, is that when we bring everybody onto the same page, we can actually avoid issues later. When we went back to that whole thing about how do you make sure that someone's going to be successful when they come in, this is part of it. That communication is key. So having a morning huddle to be able to get everybody on the same page is great. It's not really something for a webinar, is it? No. What we do that's a little bit extra is we have a goat. Our internal mascot is a goat. We want to try and be the greatest of all time. And we at B4 Networks believe that we do that by trying to be 1% better every day. So every day, go to Fur, our lovely goat. And I expect if you're in the chat, B4 fam, you can shout him out. Before goat gets given out to anyone on the team by a fellow team member, and the person who got it the day before will usually hand it out. And what we're doing by doing that is asking the team to look around and recognize their peers. Say something nice about them that they've noticed them trying. This is encouragement. You want to hear the encouragement from the leadership, but you also want to hear the encouragement from your peers. It feels different when they get encouragement from peers. So that's one way to kind of bring that in. That feedback of, recognizing when somebody steps above and beyond is really key, really important. That teamwork piece, that making people fit, how do you know they're doing a great job? How do they know they're doing a great job? This is what keeps people staying. This is what keeps people here, because who doesn't want to come to work every single day when, the mood or the vibes, as we call it, are lit. You're welcome, Heather. You need to communicate with the people who applied. I cannot stress this enough. There are too many places where when somebody who applies, like somebody applies to a job, they never hear anything back. It goes into the ether. Whether or not you're going to be moving somebody on to the next stage or not, or, if they come in for an interview and you don't decide on them, you need to communicate. And sometimes that can be difficult because it's not always an easy conversation. I have found, though, that when we communicate that somebody might not have been a fit, or maybe not a fit right now, they are much more likely to speak kindly about your company, because it sucks not getting the job, but it also really sucks not hearing anything. So that communication piece doesn't just help in terms of setting that expectation. It also helps say something about who you are, and then that person might go forward. We've had people who didn't get the job who then ended up coming back and getting it, or who have gone on to refer us to their friends, even though they went to work somewhere else, because they felt like a good vibe from us. So what you put out there in communication can have an effect, even for the people who you don't choose. You need to make sure to communicate in your job posting and nail what it is you're looking for. Communicate that ideal employee profile within the language, the tonality, all of it within those job postings. You need to make sure that once people are in, they understand what makes them great and where they can learn and grow. You also need to realize that your current staff are your greatest resources to understanding who will and won't fit. You should include them in the process. So we've been bringing in our team leads into our processes for hiring anybody for the departments that they're going to work in. This has been insightful. We get information about things that they pick up that we wouldn't necessarily pick up. And it's, if you have somebody who's going to join in on a team, how much easier is it for a new team member to be accepted when the team was included? You know, we've got another way that we do that too, where there's a couple times where we notice, roughly based on when somebody might have graduated, that they could have gone to school with one of our current team members or even a previous team member. And so we'll reach out to that team member and say, hey, do you know this person? And the answer, and I know I'm not allowed to swear, but I'll behave. The answer is usually, oh, that person's great, or a lot of expletives. So it kind of does a little bit of, oh, Kyle, yeah, that person's an asshole. So it kind of helps you do that vetting process before you go too deep down the rabbit hole. And the communication piece is also super important when you want to make sure that, and I know that there's enough talks on culture, but I just want to highlight this. Like, we do Employee Appreciation Day, and yes, ironically, we always get pizza because it's kind of funny. But one thing that I make an effort to do is I handwrite each one of my employees a card. I want them to know what it is I appreciate about them, or to feel seen. Communication is like that at every step of the way. If you have a major hire that you're looking for and somebody you're interested in, follow up with a card, follow up with a present, follow up with something when you make the offer, so that way you're communicating the value through your own actions. That's the best way to be able to do that. Okay. So we're just gonna talk about an elephant in the room. I think it's appropriate. There are generational differences that need to be acknowledged. And when we talk about attracting new talent in the digital age, uh, good job, flex point. And when we talk about attracting talent in the digital age, this is something that needs to be acknowledged. When we talk about the building blocks, I gave this its own slide because it's almost like there is a language barrier, right? We have a local restaurant. I won't out too much, but they had a sign up going, for those who want to work, please apply within. And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, wow, okay. Everybody actually wants to work. It's just a misnomer, right? If you think about each generation, everybody has a different approach to what motivates them. Understanding the different motivations is like learning a different language. And it just means that, you can capture the skill set or the approach for that generation and then help motivate them and them to be their best self. I think as a child of the 80s, I could probably wax lyrical about, my childhood, running around on bikes and getting home at, like, the street lamps are off. My mom didn't worry about me. And, you know, that's lovely. And I sure did learn a lot of resilience from having all that time on my own. But I need to recognize, and anybody who's leading people need to recognize, that the current generations coming up did not have those same opportunities. So either you could complain about it, or you could figure your way around it. You could go, what do they need in order to be successful? What opportunities did they not get a chance to practice, right? Everybody who grew up with television and a remote, you don't think of yourself as privileged because you had to watch commercials. But the generation before you that had to get up and go and turn the channel by changing the dial just says, oh, you're lazy. Well, now there's no commercials and everybody's just binge watching things. There's things that get lost in terms of practicing patience, or in terms of, how you time manage. And those are small little things. Now, that being said, this current generation is more technically savvy in some ways than previous generations were. There are benefits to every generation, and you just need to have a plan and understand how to fill those gaps where they're necessary, but also be realistic about where the strengths are, right? There is a lot that you can learn and gain from that, so that's important. All right, I'm trying to make sure I don't talk too much. So one thing specifically that we did at B4 is recognize that it is sales and marketing. So what do you do when you're trying to do any kind of sales and marketing? You get testimonials. If you go to our website, on our careers page, you will actually see testimonials, video testimonials, so that you know it's real. Even though there's written ones too, but the video ones, they're current and past employees that were willing to speak to the specific strengths of B4 Networks as an employer. This was important because we wanted people to hear in this person's words what it was that they felt or experienced on this journey. I highly recommend capturing in whatever way that's comfortable for your staff, what it is that they love. Because not only will this put out their good vibes about your company, but this will also help again with that ideal employee profile. Whatever they're talking about, whatever they communicate in terms of their appreciation, is going to speak to someone who would also appreciate that. This has been the most, probably, I would say, tied for the most valuable thing that we've done in terms of putting out who we are. We have Google reviews, we have the video testimonials, and then we have written testimonials as well. And these are, not only do they give credit to us as an employer in terms of, when we're going out there and we're asking for opportunities with colleges and universities, but they also allow somebody to get a bit of a snapshot. Because one thing I can say with that generational divide is that the current generation really needs to know that the employer that they're working with is somebody that they can trust and that will value them. And that is a very difficult thing to communicate in a short interview time spot. So I need you to think of what fits or makes sense for you to do this. If you're struggling with talent, find a way to get the people who currently work for you to say something nice about you. And if they don't want to say anything nice about you, then maybe you should go back to the building blocks in the beginning, and ask yourself why and work on that first. All right. So when I said that we had things that worked well and things that didn't work well, um, I know that this is going to sound ridiculous, especially being in the MSP space. Privacy, security are huge things, but I will also say that social media can be your friend. However, you need to do it in order to make it secure. I highly recommend that if culture is important to you, put your culture out there. Have whatever days you celebrate be out there. One thing that we did really well, and I think if you find us on TikTok, although maybe don't find us because sometimes some of the stuff's embarrassing, but whatever. We put out our culture. We put out, our sillies. We put out really weird stuff, because we as a company are weird. Anybody who comes in here expecting to be, straight laced and not sarcastic, or doesn't get sarcasm, probably will want to leave quickly. So rather than go through the process and hire that person and have them figure out they don't fit, let's just be weird up front. Let's show that off. And it was an idea that we had, and I think I'm the one who pushed for it, but I don't want to take too much credit. But in any case, we as a company put it forward, and I will say that we knew it was successful when, sorry for the nickname, when Logie Bear came to us, because Logan, who is one of our technicians that came to us last year, he said in his interview process, he was like, I can't wait to start and get the Noob Award. And the Noob Award was something that we highlighted in one of our TikToks, where it's a little trophy that we give out for new employees, to kind of welcome them. And it usually goes on Employee Appreciation Day when we hand out awards to the most recent employee as well. And so that he would mention that in his interview let me know that he came here specifically for us. He saw the weird and went, I'm going to fit in here. And whatever that is for you, maybe it's not weird, maybe it's something else that you want to highlight. Whatever it is that you have in your ideal employee profile, make sure you bring that out on social media. Make sure that your culture surrounding it gets highlighted in ways that are visible for somebody, especially considering that technicians tend to not necessarily be as extroverted and can't engage in the same way. So I would recommend putting yourself out there. It's not going to hurt. All right. I'm going to have to whip through these next ones because we've got only a short amount of time left, I think. Yeah. So the next one, what if it goes wrong? And the reason why I mention this is because it's important to have a plan. I think feedback from your current staff and open dialogue is, great, for how they're feeling, but it's also really good for how a new staff member is fitting in, right? Have a plan for what happens if it goes wrong. And I say that from the perspective of getting that feedback, but also for how you're going to deal with the reviews online. How are you going to respond to a negative review? Because if somebody comes in and they get hired and it doesn't work out right away, the first thing they're going to do, especially if they're angry because they got let go, is head to Glassdoor. So as a company, you need to have a plan for how you handle that. And it should be done in a way that makes it transparent, because there's nothing more, I don't want to say inviting because that's not the right word, but that helps overcome an objection is when you meet something like that face on. So have the plan for how you're going to deal with that from the beginning. All right. My next little soapbox that I will make very short. Exit interviews. Exit interviews can be great, but they can also be a huge waste of time. If somebody is leaving that you are sad is leaving and you could have seen working out long term, you definitely need to sit down with them and find out why it didn't work out. And when we talk about attracting talent, I know that it seems like exit interviews wouldn't be a logical place to start, but in fact, whenever something goes wrong, it is a perfect time to look at what you can do better for next time. That kind of goes to the whole goat thing from before. So I would say that, when an employee doesn't work out that you kind of assumed wasn't going to work out, that you kind of figured out part of the way through. I'm not saying that you don't ask them questions. I just say you take it for what it's worth and maybe don't let it be a distraction in changing who you are. But the ones who leave that you wish hadn't left or, that you thought were going to work out long term, I think it's really important to sit down with them and get that feedback so that you can turn around and make the changes that are necessary. All right. So we kind of said it before, but word of mouth works for this too. Have a referral program. Have something where if an employee refers their friend or brings the right person in and they're there for a certain amount of time, give a bonus based on that. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But the point of that whole process is you want to try and leverage the current people because ultimately, yeah, they want to get that money, but they also want to work with someone that they're going to be able to work with long term. And then I will keep that one a little bit short and ask, is there any questions? Do they come through on Q&A here? Okay, for AJ, I don't know. I'm kind of open with it. I think there are a couple tells. You can usually ask someone what they're passionate about, and a neurodivergent person will jump into like 7 different things. But I think I personally would lead with it, and I would almost talk about it as a strength. Anywhere that isn't accepting of neurodivergence as a whole, probably isn't going to be a fit anyway. I think it's important to lead with it. Just say, I've got these coping mechanisms. I've got these skills that I've learned. It's not a detractor for me, but I like to let people know because it is something that is important about how I work. I think that was the only one that came up here. Oh yeah, Kayla mentioned the murder mystery.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Man, that was really good. What's funny is thinking back to my early days getting into IT, I worked for a small company called Geek Squad. You guys may have heard it.
Yeah.
1,200 locations, 20 employees per location. And I can tell you the number one problem that we had wasn't intelligence. It wasn't having the best nerds of all, even though people like to give us shit for it. It was recruitment. When you have to bring that many people in that fast, having people want to work for you and wanting to grow with you was the number one differentiator we had in the early 2000s. Now, you guys can make fun of the brand all you want, but think of the scale of how many employees that is. 15 times 100.
And I think a lot of us are going to have to deal with that kind of scale. I mean, there's always seasons. In terms of like, there's always going to be seasons that you're going to want to hire more. So right when school finishes and stuff like that, you want to try and capture new talent as they come out. So I personally have the ethos, and I think my techs will laugh at me when they see this, but I prefer to get a tech right out of school when they're a little bit less broken than when they go off into the world and and get exposed to goodness knows what kind of leadership. But I'd take them out of high school if I could, honestly.
And that's the whole thing. Like, if you look at, and that was what we did at Geek Squad, was where is the number one pool of people willing to listen, willing to learn, and they don't have the chip on their shoulder that they want to do things their way. Because part of your culture is sometimes people have to change how they like to do things, right? Let's talk about timesheets. Let's talk about
Yeah,
paperwork. Let's talk about documentation. Your
yeah,
employees fucking hate it.
they do.
But you know
They don't
what?
like.
It's a non-negotiable because you are a service first company.
Yeah, but I think it's all in how you talk about it, though. All those things go back to how. So, like when you talk about timesheets, for example, you can't just say you have to do it. Like, I mean, you could say that to a certain generation because that's the way that they do it. I find that people from like 90s, 2000s, and on, they want to know why. They want to understand it. And I'm not going to stop that curiosity. I mean, I could get in my head and go, I'm the boss, do what I say. But the reality is that that's stifling that curiosity. And if we want that curiosity and that questioning when it comes to problem solving, why would you want to kill it when it comes to that stuff? So, like, you kind of have to go across the board there. And I just
No.
wanted to say that Mary's comment about the person identifying as autistic in the straight up when she said she learned from someone, this is what will happen. Every person that comes into your organization that has a different lived experience, that has a different thing they contribute, that diversity of thought is going to show up in how you problem solve. And for all of us, it would be silly to not accept and take that on as a strength, and just expect that homogeneity. That drives me bonkers.
Um, no, and you said something earlier, and it made well, the only thought, and I think a closing remark from me on this one is you're gonna hire a lot of different people that have a lot of different needs, regardless of spectrum or special needs or any of those types of categories. Sometimes just people have different personalities. Sorry. Your sales guys are going to talk differently. Your finance team's going to act differently. I had 120 people at my MSP. I can tell you right now, if I, as their leader, talked to all of them the same way, they probably would have all fired me and not had, I think, 8 of them own their own companies at this point.
Yeah.
So there's a world in which you have to create a pathway to resiliency
Hmm.
for all of your team. And I think that's exactly what you're hitting on. With that being said, we do need to wrap this up, Amanda. This has been fantastic. Great conversation. Everyone hit the clap emoji for me. And with that being said, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And our keynote, don't stay tuned, is one of my favorite people in this entire channel. Sean Torres is coming up. See you guys in a minute.
Thanks, Kyle.